Hello, I'm Mike. I have been teaching myself animation for the past 2.5 years, and recently I finished my biggest project yet, my short film, Beyond the Scrapyard. This project was a big personal milestone. I wanted to challenge myself to go through the full creative process and actually finish something substantial. And after working on it for 9 months in my spare time, I'm pretty proud of how it turned out. So, I just wanted to show you how I made it. I always found it interesting when a creator shares their process, and I believe that this could be helpful if you're thinking of making something too. Let's get started. I don't overthink much when it comes to finding ideas for a creative project. I just try to interpret whatever I'm feeling at the moment, which at the time I was starting this project was a lot of ambition and obsession, that constant urge to improve, to prove something. So naturally, that ended up becoming the core theme of the film. To find inspiration, I went through my sketchbooks, and this character stood out to me. I really liked this design, and I started asking questions. Who is he? Why does he look so serious? Why does the coat feel more expressive than his face? He felt like someone who suppresses everything except the one thing he cares about. The coat moving in the wind started to feel symbolic, like it represented something inside him that he couldn't contain. And once I imagined him as an engineer obsessed with flight, the rest followed naturally. Then came the robot. If he can't express himself directly, maybe his creations can do it for him. Suddenly, the dynamic made sense. From there, the story almost built itself. An engineer who keeps building planes that crash to a scrapyard of his own failures, each attempt bringing him slightly closer to finally flying beyond it. I thought that was a neat way to visualize the main themes I was going for. With an idea in mind, it's time to just test things. This means making a rough script, reference boards, figuring out design, art style, colors, animation test, audio test, experimenting with a musical style and themes, whatever solidifies the concept of the film. I really like this stage, when nothing has been set in stone and everything feels possible. It's all very exciting, up until it's time to actually make all of these things. One rule I go by is that my first idea is never the best one, so even if I think I found something I like, I still push myself to try different things and take my time. I spent about a month here experimenting with ideas. Of course, most of the work here didn't make it into the final film, but it helped me understand what actually works. So when I finally had a good sense of what the final outcome was going to look like, I organized everything into one big table. I broke the film down shot by shot, added descriptions, and listed all the tasks needed for each one. The nice thing is that once it's all written out like that, the project stops feeling abstract. If I just check off every box, the film will be done. So let's start with the first thing on the list. A storyboard is a sequence of rough drawings that map out a film shot by shot. This is where you figure out the composition of the film and how shots flow into each other. They are made on purpose since they are meant for experimenting while changes are still cheap. I spent about 5 weeks working on this, which involved a lot of restructuring of the shots I have thought of earlier. I generally try to guide the viewer's focus using the environment to frame the main subject, or using leading lines to subtly point toward it. It's also important to maintain the focus from shot to shot. For example, if the subject is on one side of the frame in one shot, I'll often keep it on the same side in the next. That way the viewer's eyes don't have to search for it again, making the transition look smooth and the story easier to follow. Using the storyboards, I also planned the colors of the film. I picked key shots and used them to build a color script. This allowed me to see the progressions of tones and moods across the whole film before painting anything. It made the final coloring feel intentional and ensured each scene transitioned smoothly into the next. I don't really know much about music, but I thought it would be nice trying to compose the soundtrack of the film by myself. And it was. Since the film is short, all of the tracks revolve around one main theme so they can all tie together. It's this one here. The melody slowly lifts up, then quickly falls off, over and over again, just like code does. Not all tracks share this exact motif, but they still follow the falling note idea and share the same key and chord progression. Listen to some of these. Well, all of them except for this thing. I thought it would be funny if it had nothing to do with the rest of the soundtrack. Once I had an early version of the soundtrack, I combined it with the storyboards to create the animatic. The animatic is basically the storyboard edited together with the music to establish the timing of each shot. It's the first WhatsApp version of the film, and this is the point where the project actually starts to feel real. This was pretty straightforward because the art style, colors and layouts were already locked in through the storyboard and color script. At that point, it becomes a matter of execution, so this stage was quick, only taking about 2 weeks. For more complex shots, in the garage and the scrapyard, I first built simple 3D reference scenes. That helped me keep the perspective consistent in every shot. I also had to think ahead about which parts of the background will need to be moved later, and remember to keep them in different layers so they could be animated independently. That's about it. This is my favorite part. It's usually the longest stage of the process. It took me 3 months to animate everything. I started with the easier shots to warm up and get used to the character's movement. As I animated more, I got better at understanding the personalities, which made it easier to tackle the more complex scenes later on. Code moves in a very controlled, almost stiff way. He doesn't waste motion. His body is restrained, but his code is alive, flowing, reacting to wind, exaggerating what he refuses to show on his face. Mudem is the opposite. He's expressive and chaotic, but still mechanical, so he has precise motion while still feeling playful due to the exaggerated follow-through of all of his parts. Working off the animatic, I started with rough poses and keyframes, focusing on getting the idea across before worrying about polish. Once the motion felt right, I added in between and refined the timing. But since the art style is intentionally kinda messy, I skipped traditional line art and instead cleaned up the rough animation directly. Finally, for the plane, I made another 3D model and animated it first, then used that as a reference for the 2D animation. I hate this part. This is it. Oh, here is yet another thing I don't know much about. I got some sound effects from YouTube, and I also made a few myself by layering and editing sounds together. Especially for Modem, I made all of his sounds using a GarageBand instrument. When mixing, I try to prioritize it like this: key sound effects first, then music, then ambience, and finally any supporting sounds. The problem is that Procreate Dreams, the software I used, isn't really built for detailed audio editing, and by the time I reached this stage, I didn't have time to learn new software or experiment with the audio a lot. If I did it again, I would export everything and mix it properly in a dedicated audio software. But for now, I'm not satisfied with how the audio turned out. Actually, I'm not satisfied with a lot of things in this film, to be honest. But that's okay. I see a lot of people who never dare to make anything because they are afraid that it won't turn out good. Of course it's going to be bad if you have never done it before, but that's kind of the point. I also had moments during this project where I completely lost motivation, especially near the end, when the film was finally coming together and I realized it wasn't as good as I was hoping for it to be. This film isn't perfect. It has flaws, but it exists. I finished it, and I learned more from completing it than I would have from endlessly planning something better. So, if you want to make something, make it. Let it be imperfect. then move on to the next one. Let it crash, then try again. And eventually, I believe we will fly beyond our own scrapyard.